Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. We talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm Roach Jeffrey. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our video. The transfer portal train just continues to roll on in college basketball, and the Tennessee Volunteers just landed a massive commitment. The former Harvard small forward Chris Ledlum has decided to transfer to the Tennessee Volunteers. I'm going to go over everything that has to do with Chris Ledlum as a basketball player and how much I think he could potentially help out Tennessee basketball next season, and whether I think Tennessee can finally be a team that can make a deep run in March Madness. Now, Chris Ledlum, he's a 6'6", 225-pound small forward out of the Harvard Crimson, and he averaged 18.8 points per game, 8.5 rebounds, and 1.6 assists for Harvard this past season, and he's a high IQ player. Obviously, playing for Harvard in the Ivy League, you have to be a really smart person to be at that university, so he's definitely a high IQ individual, and I think that this is a big addition for Tennessee in a variety of ways because the Tennessee roster right now is in flux, and I think Chris Ledlum will definitely be a guy that can really plug in and be able to play a massive role for Tennessee next season. There are some flaws in Chris Ledlum's game, however. He did only shoot 47.3% from the field, which is not too bad, but the next two stats are really concerning. He shot 29.4% from the three-point line and 63.5% from the free throw line. And he is a 6'6" big-bodied forward, so you're not expecting him to shoot 80-85% at the line, but 63.6% from the free throw line is not that great. You would like that number to be a bit higher, and he only shot 29.4% from the three-point line, which I think is partly a byproduct of the fact that he was the best player on the Harvard team this past season, so he did have to take some threes that probably weren't great looks, but he had to because he was by far the best player, so he had to chunk up some shots. But I do think he has the potential to increase that three-point field goal percentage at Tennessee next season. Being surrounded by much more talent, you'll be taking better shots, you'll be getting way more passes being given to him from really good players, and that could potentially increase his three-point shooting percentage next season, but the free throw numbers kind of speak volumes. The fact he doesn't shoot well at the line shows he's not a great shooter overall, but he's still a great addition for Tennessee because he did average 18 points per game and 8 rebounds in the Ivy League, and no, you're not expecting him to be able to replicate that scoring production and rebounding production in the SEC. He's probably going to take a step back to only averaging around 10 to 12 points per game and probably 5 to 6 boards a game, but still that's a big addition for Tennessee because Tennessee needed forward depth after they've had a lot of roster flux right now, and we'll get to it in a minute, but I think Chris Ledlum definitely is a guy that could potentially raise Tennessee's floor for next season and potentially be able to increase its ceiling a bit. Rick Barnes definitely is a great coach. He's had a lot of success at Texas and Tennessee and wherever he's coached in college basketball, but the one thing Rick Barnes has struggled with is being able to advance far in March Madness. He's definitely needed to upgrade the roster after losing a lot of players in this offseason, and I think Chris Ledlum definitely fits the bill. He provides a lot of scoring punch to Tennessee. He's definitely has some flaws in his game, but Chris Ledlum will definitely work hard, and I think Tennessee being able to land Chris Ledlum over Indiana and St. John's is huge because St. John's with Rick Pitino, they are definitely a force right now in the Big East. Rick Pitino's landing a lot of great players, and he's definitely raising up St. John's from the ashes and being able to potentially help St. John's be a really good team in the Big East next season. In Indiana, you have Mike Woodson. He's an NBA head coach, and Indiana's definitely a team that needed a player at the 3, and that could have potentially helped out Indiana next season. So Tennessee was able to get a player that a Hall of Famer, Rick Pitino, and a former NBA head coach in Mike Woodson both wanted, and I think that Tennessee definitely is doing a great job in college basketball right now. Rick Barnes, it has never been a lack of recruiting for him. He's always recruited at a high level, and now he's bringing really good transfer portal players in, but it's about having success in March Madness and being able to compete in the SEC against the Alabamas, Arkansas, Kentuckys, and even Auburn's and LSU's that could be better in this next season, and potentially Chris Ledlum could definitely help out in a lot of ways there, because you look at Tennessee's roster, Tyreek Key, he's gone. Olivier Nakuma, he's in the transfer portal. And you look at Chris Ledlum, he's a very similar player to Olivier Nakuma. Maybe Chris Ledlum will be able to replace what Olivier Nakuma is leaving for Tennessee. Olivier Nakuma was really coming on strong last season for Tennessee, had a big game against the Duke Blue Devils in the NCAA tournament. It's a massive loss for the Tennessee Volunteers, but still, Olivier Nakuma's being gone, it is what it is, but Chris Ledlum will definitely be able to help in that regard. And also, Tennessee has a good recruiting class coming in. J.P. Estrella, Cameron Carr, and Cade Phillips, all really good players for Tennessee coming in. J.P. Estrella is the highest-ranked player of the 3 as a 4-star recruit, but they have 2 4-stars coming in, also in Cameron Carr as well. So I do think that Tennessee will have a freshman class that could contribute in year 1. Maybe they won't be really big contributors overall, maybe not putting up 10 points per game, but I think all 3 could definitely help Tennessee out in a variety of ways. Zakai Ziegler, he's back, and Zakai Ziegler's injury was a massive loss for Tennessee in the NCAA tournament last year because Zakai Ziegler, he runs the whole entire team, And I think that Tennessee maybe could have went further in the tournament last year if they had had Zakai Ziegler, but he got hurt. There's nothing you can do about it. But he's back, and that is a massive re-addition for Tennessee. Santiago Vescovi, he's back as well. And Santiago Vescovi did not have to come back. He could have explored professional opportunities, but he's coming back yet again for Tennessee, and he was by far the leading scorer on Tennessee this past season. He's a really good player, a great three-point shooter, and a great team player overall, and he plays really hard for the Tennessee Volunteers, so that's big for Tennessee. Julian Phillips and Josiah Jordan-James are both testing the NBA draft waters. If both of those players come back, that would really help out Tennessee, potentially improve their stock in the SEC for next season, maybe make them a top 20 team in college basketball. Maybe they already are with Chris Ledlum's addition, but I think getting Josiah Jordan-James and Julian Phillips would be huge re-additions to the Tennessee roster, and I think it's very possible they both come back. Josiah Jordan-James would be very interesting to see if he can pair with Chris Ledlum, because they are both similar players, but Josiah Jordan-James did pair with Olivier Nakuma, so I think it could work. And Chris Ledlum's not the only transfer portal player that Rick Barnes has brought in. Jordan Gainey averaged over 15 points per game at USC Upstate. He's transferring into Tennessee, and he is the son of associate head coach Justin Gainey, who is on the Tennessee coaching staff, so I think that's a big reason they were able to land him. And even though Jordan Gainey averaged 15 points per game at USC Upstate, he won't be able to average that at Tennessee more than likely, so like Chris Ledlum, he'll probably take a step back in scoring, but even if he averages 8 to 9 points per game, that's a good addition for Tennessee. And Jonas Adu, he's back. Freddie DeLeon is back as well, and Uros Plavic, he is undecided. He has not announced whether he is returning to Tennessee or leaving the Tennessee Volunteers, but I do think overall, the Tennessee roster, there are a lot of question marks still on it, and if Josiah Jordan-James and Julian Phillips do decide to leave the Tennessee Volunteers and go to the NBA draft, then I do think that Rick Barnes will have to be able to bring in 2 more transfers that could potentially slide in, maybe be improvements over the 2 players that they would be losing. And if Rick Barnes could do that, then I think that Tennessee could potentially have a really good basketball team in the SEC next season. But the big key for Rick Barnes, can they have a lot of success in March Madness? And is Chris Ledlum's addition going to be able to help Tennessee in that regard? I think Chris Ledlum is a really solid player, and I think Jordan Gainey is as well. And like I said earlier, I think these additions really do help Tennessee's floor be raised, and they're not going to be a team that's in the bottom half of the SEC. They're definitely going to be a top half team in the SEC, and I really think they could potentially be a top 20 to top 15 team in college basketball next season, especially if they get a couple more portal additions if Josiah Jordan-James and Julian Phillips do leave. But the problem with the Tennessee roster is they don't have many stars on it. They don't have a guy that averages almost 20 points per game, like a Jalen Wilson for Kansas, or a Zach Edey for Purdue, or Trace Jackson Davis for Indiana. Obviously, some of those teams did not go far in March Madness, but you do have to have a player that can step up and make big buckets late. And I do feel like Tennessee is held back a little bit because of that. Santiago Vescovi was the leading scorer for Tennessee this past season, and he only averaged 12 points per game. He's a great player, and he does a lot of big things for the Tennessee Volunteers, but I don't think Chris Ledlum or Jordan Gainey's additions are really going to necessarily be guys that are going to be able to come in for Tennessee and be able to score at a high level. I feel like they're both going to score less than Santiago Vescovi. Maybe Chris Ledlum can get around the neighborhood of 10 to 12 points per game, but he's not going to be a guy that's going to average 15 to 18 points per game like he did at Harvard. But I still think Chris Ledlum's a great addition for Tennessee. If they do get Josiah Jordan-James and Julian Phillips back, then I think Tennessee's roster is in great shape. They'll have so much balance, and they'll have a lot of depth, so I think that will be big for Tennessee next season. It will definitely make their floor very high. They're not going to be a bad team at all next year, but can Rick Barnes get this team all the way to a deep run in March Madness and potentially be able to beat out Alabama, Arkansas, Kentucky, and some of these other teams in the SEC to be the best team in the SEC next season? I'm not sure, but I don't think Rick Barnes is done yet in the transfer portal. The roster's still in flux for Tennessee. We don't know what all these players are going to do, and if Rick Barnes is able to bring in some other transfer portal players, if some of these players leave that are even better than what they've lost, then I think Tennessee could be even better, and maybe they could be a team that makes a run in March Madness and be one of the best teams in the SEC next season. But it's going to be very interesting. But as is, I think Chris Ledlum is a big addition for Tennessee because he's definitely a player that's not going to hurt you in any way. He's going to be able to come in and play at a high level, and a lot of people are comparing his game to Grant Williams, and I think that that's a big reason why Chris Ledlum might have chose Tennessee over St. John's and Indiana, because Rick Barnes showed the Grant Williams film, and Chris Ledlum was very similar, and I think that Rick Barnes was able to sell him on the fact that he's going to be able to use him in a very similar way to the team and be able to have a really good season for Tennessee next year. I think Chris Ledlum's a big addition for Tennessee. I think it definitely raises the floor for the Volunteers, and some of the other additions they have made I think will definitely help Tennessee out next year, but we're going to have to see what Rick Barnes is able to do in the transfer portal as well to potentially make Tennessee an even better team if some players leave. But I do think Chris Ledlum is a big addition position for Tennessee to be able to keep him from going to Indiana and St. John's, and he'll definitely help out the Tennessee Volunteers be a really good team next season. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Comment down below what you think about Chris Ledlum transferring from Harvard to Tennessee, and whether you think this potentially does help Tennessee be a really good team next season, and whether you think that Rick Barnes has to do more in the transfer portal if he loses players to help Tennessee be an even better team next season, potentially have them make a deep run in March Madness and be one of the best teams in the SEC next year. Follow me on Twitter as well. Link is in the description, and I will see you next time.